The air in the banquet hall was thick with the scent of buffet food and expensive perfume. A sea of faces, all smiling, all chatting, all celebrating my stepson's high school graduation. You could feel the pride radiating off the family's clusters of people bound by blood and history. And I was there on the periphery of one of those clusters, my husband's hand, a warm, steady pressure on my lower back. He was my anchor in all this. But even with him there, I felt it, that subtle shift in the atmosphere, a cold draft. In a warm room, I didn't need to turn around to know she had arrived. He's incredible, I agreed, refusing to take the bait. We're so proud of him. The tension built over years. It was a low hum in the background of our lives, a storm cloud always on the horizon. We learned to live with it, to appreciate the sunny days, and batten down the hatches when she rolled in. But I could feel it, this pressure building, and I knew somehow that it couldn't last forever. Something had to give. The day of reckoning was Jamie's high school graduation. It was supposed to be a pure celebration. You had worked so hard to make it perfect for him. And there she was, Sarah, making a grand entrance, dressed more for a gala than a graduation party. She immediately found us in the crowd. The smirk was back. She floated over and started in almost immediately. Everything looks so nice, she said, her eyes sweeping over the backyard you had decorated so beautifully. You've always been so good with the details. It was condescension masquerading as a compliment. Jamie was talking with some friends nearby, and she lowered her voice. It must be so rewarding for you after all these years, to finally feel like you've made a mark. That was the line. I felt my jaw tighten, my protective instinct kicked into overdrive. This was it. This was the moment I was going to finally speak up, to tell her that her mark was a scar and yours was a foundation. I took a small step forward, ready to shield you, to end this once and for all. But I stopped, because I saw your face. You didn't look angry or hurt, you looked calm. And I saw Jamie detach himself from his friends and start walking towards us. He had heard it. He was 17 now, taller than me, a young man. The little boy who used to cling to my leg was gone. He walked right up to our little group. He didn't look at his biological mother, he looked at you. And he put his arm around your shoulders, pulling you into a firm, solid side hug. It wasn't a showy gesture, it was natural, possessive, definitive. Then he turned to Sarah. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that silenced the entire corner of the yard. For me, Mom, he said. And for a second I thought he was talking to Sarah, but he was still looking at you then. He clarified, turning his gaze to his biological mother. Sarah, this woman right here, he said, his grip on you tightening just a little, is the one who drove me to school every day for 10 years. She's the one who helped me with my science projects and nursed me through the flu. She's the one who taught me how to treat people with respect. She is my mother. And if you can't show her the respect she deserves, then you don't need to be here at my celebration. The smirk on Sarah's face didn't just fade, it dissolved. It was like watching a building collapse in on itself. In silence, all the arrogance, the condescension, the sense of superiority, it just evaporated, leaving behind a hollowed-out shock. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The truth of his words, delivered with such quiet conviction, was an arrow that found its mark with unerring accuracy. There was no arguing with it. There was no snide remark that could undo it. The family bond she had always claimed as her exclusive right was now being used as the very thing that excluded her. She was being shown the door by the son she claimed to love, and the key was the love he had for you. She repeated, letting the word hang in the air for a beat too long. It must be interesting stepping into a ready-made family. I imagine it comes with quite a learning curve, all the history you weren't a part of. In that moment, my heart felt like it was going to burst out of my chest. The anger I had felt was completely washed away by a tidal wave of pride in my son, for having the courage and the clarity to speak his truth, and pride in you, my wife, pride in the woman whose quiet, consistent love had built such an unshakable foundation that our son could stand on it with absolute confidence. You didn't have to say a word. Your love, your years of action had spoken for you through him. It was the most profound justice I had ever witnessed. Sarah left shortly after that. She made some excuse, but we all knew the truth. The party continued, but the air was different. It was clearer, lighter. The cloud that had followed us for over a decade was just gone. That night, after everyone had left, I looked at you and Jamie laughing together in the kitchen. As you cleaned up this family, our family wasn't forged by biology or obligation. It was forged by choice, by your choice, every single day, to love us, to show up, to be there. I have a respect for you, that goes deeper than any romantic love you took on a wounded boy and a struggling father. And you built a home with us, you chose us. And in doing so you gave us the greatest gift, the chance to choose you back completely. And without reservation. That moment at the party brought a closure I didn't even know we needed. It was like a door clicking shut, finally locking out the past. We were no longer a family defined by what was broken, but by what we had built. We were complete, we were secure. I finally understood redemption that day. It's not about erasing the past, it's about building a new future, so strong, so full of light, that the shadows of the past simply can't survive in it. And a parent, a real parent, it has nothing to do with blood. It has everything to do with heart. It's about being brave enough to love someone else's child as your own. And in doing so showing them what real unwavering love actually looks like. You did that. You are his mother in every way that truly matters. And watching my son embrace you, as exactly that was the proudest moment of my life. The clatter of silverware and the low hum of a dozen conversations filled the air. The restaurant was one of those modern, expensive places, all polished concrete and soft lighting, where every laugh feels a little too loud, and every gesture is on display. I was just taking a sip of my water, listening to my husband talk about his work trip, when her voice cut across the table, sharp and sweet like poisoned honey. She was leaning forward slightly, her eyes fixed on me, a faint condescending smile playing on her lips. "It's just so interesting," she said, her tone implying the exact opposite. "You have this version of him you've built up in your head, the son you think you know, but you have to understand the core of him, his real personality, the things he truly needs. That all comes from his real family. It's in the blood. You can't really get that from the outside, can you?" I felt a flush of heat rise up my neck, but I kept my smile in place. Every family has its own history. We're just building ours one day at a time. Then came the smirk. It was a small, tight-lipped thing, a flash of supreme confidence, meant to diminish me, to remind everyone at the table, her son, my husband, even me, off my place. I was the outsider, the stand-in, the temporary fixture in that moment. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade, and all I could see was that smug, dismissive expression. It didn't hurt the way she probably intended. Instead, it acted like a key turning a lock deep inside me, and a memory vivid and complete flooded my mind. It was a hot, dusty afternoon years ago. He was 7, maybe 8. The training wheels had just come off his bike. For the first time I was inside folding laundry. When I heard the crash, it wasn't the normal stumble. It was the sound of metal scraping against asphalt. And a cry that was pure sharp pain. I dropped everything and ran outside. He was lying in the middle of the driveway, his new jeans torn at the knee, blood already welling up and mixing with the gravel. His face was crumpled, tears streaming through the dirt on his cheeks. I didn't hesitate. I scooped him up, his small body trembling against mine, and carried him inside. I sat him on the edge of the bathroom counter, ran cool water over the scrape, carefully picking out the tiny bits of gravel. He winced, his little hands gripping my shoulders. "It's okay," I kept whispering, "just breathe. You're so brave." I got the antiseptic, and I told him to squeeze my hand as hard as he needed to. When it stung, he did, his small fingers surprisingly strong. I placed the bandage over the wound, a bright blue one with cartoon sharks on it. He was calming down, his sobs turning into shaky breaths, resting his head against my chest. I held him there for a long time, just rocking gently. And I remembered something else, a detail from that same day. After I had him settled on the couch with a blanket and a popsicle, I went back outside to get his bike. My hands were shaking a little. I picked up my phone, and I called her. It went straight to voicemail. I left a message, my voice deliberately calm. "Hi, it's me, just wanted to let you know. He took a little spill on his bike. He's fine. Just a scraped knee. We've got it all cleaned up, no need to worry." She never called back, not that day, not the next. I found out weeks later she'd been on a spa weekend with a new boyfriend. The scraped knee wasn't a part of that narrative. The sounds of the restaurant rushed back, and my husband was looking at me, a question in his eyes. She was still smirking, waiting for a reaction, for me to be flustered or angry. I just looked back at her, and a genuine calm smile spread across my own face. I didn't need to be loud, I didn't need to be cruel. I simply said, my voice clear and steady, "I know him better than you think." Her smirk faltered for a second, replaced by a flicker of confusion. She regrouped quickly, taking a long drink of her wine. The conversation moved on awkwardly to other topics, but the tension was still there, simmering a little, while later the subject of his job came up. He'd recently turned down a lucrative offer from a big financial firm to stay with a smaller nonprofit he was passionate about. She sighed a performative, weary sound. I just hope this phase is worth it. A young man needs to build a foundation security. I worry he's being naive chasing a feeling. Instead of a future, her eyes darted toward me, as if I were the influence behind this perceived mistake. Her smirk returned a little sharper, this time how quaint. Another memory just as clear surfaced. He was 16. I came home late from work and found the house dark and silent. Except for a faint light coming from the kitchen, he was sitting at the table still in his school clothes, just staring at the wall. His phone was face down on the table. I put my bag down and sat across from him. I didn't say anything for a while. Finally, he spoke, his voice thick. She broke up with me, Sarah. It was his first real girlfriend, his first real heartbreak. He thought it was forever's. I made us both hot chocolate the way I did when he was little with marshmallows. We sat there for hours. I told him about my first big breakup. When I was his age, I told him how it felt like the world had ended. And how eventually it didn't. I listened, as he talked about her, about what he thought they had, about the things shed. Said I didn't trivialize his pain. I didn't tell him he'd find someone else. I just sat with him. In it I was the one he confided, in the one whose shoulder he cried on. He fell asleep on the couch, and I covered him with a blanket. His mother was on a cruise that week. She sent a postcard. Back at the restaurant table, I could feel my husband's hand on mine under the table, a silent show of support. I just looked at her, and I didn't need to say a thing. My silence was its own answer. But she wasn't finished. The wine was loosening her tongue, and the need to reassert her primacy was too strong. I mean, look at the path he's on. She continued, addressing the table, but aiming at me. The choices he's making, it's a pattern. I can't help but feel that if he had a stronger, more traditional guidance during those formative years. She let the sentence hang, a blatant accusation. This time the memory was of stacks of paper and the glow of a laptop screen. Late at night, college applications. It was a time of immense stress for him. He was overwhelmed by the choices, the essays, the pressure to make a decision that would define his life. His father was supportive, but busy, and his biological mother offered grand, impractical suggestions from a distance. Ivy League schools that were a reach financially and academically, based more on prestige than fit. I was the one in the trenches with him, night after night. After my own work was done, I'd sit with him at the dining room table. We went through every brochure, every website. I read draft after draft of his personal essay. We talked about what he really wanted, not what he thought he was supposed to want. I helped him hone his story to find the authentic thread that would make his application stand out. When the acceptance letters came, I was the first person he showed. When he finally chose the small liberal arts college that felt right to him, I was the one he called his champion. I was the support system. I was there. The table had gone quiet. Her last comment had been a bridge too far. My husband was about to speak, his face set in a stern line. But before he could, a new voice cut through the tension. It was his voice, her son, our son. It was at that moment that Leo spotted us. His face lit up, and he started weaving his way through the crowd towards our little group. Miranda's expression shifted instantly into a picture of maternal warmth. Here he comes, my handsome graduate. He had been quiet through most of this, looking increasingly uncomfortable now. He put his fork down carefully and looked directly at his biological mother. His expression wasn't angry, it was resolute, final. Mom, he said, and the word had a new weight to it. You need to stop. He took a breath. You talk about my real needs, my core. Let me tell you what my core remembers. He began to list them, not with malice, but with the simple, crushing weight of fact. I remember falling off my bike and scraping my knee to the bone. I remember who ran out and picked me up, who cleaned the gravel out and held me while I cried. It wasn't you. I called you. You were unavailable. I remember when Sarah broke my heart. I remember who stayed up with me until 3 in the morning, who made me hot chocolate and told me it was okay to be sad. It wasn't you. You were on a boat. And my career, my choices. I remember spending weeks trying to write my college essay. I remember who sat with me every night, who helped me find the words to describe who I actually am, who believed in me when I wanted to do something that mattered, not just something that paid well. It was her. He looked from her to me, and his eyes were full of a love that had been earned day by day, scrape by scrape, heartbreak by heartbreak. You keep talking about blood, about being his real mother. He paused, and his voice was firm, leaving no room for argument. She was there. You weren't. She is my mother. The silence that followed was absolute. The smirk on her face didn't just fade, it was erased, wiped away by a wave of dawning horror. And profound shame, you could see the calculations happening behind her eyes. The rapid inventory of missed birthdays, skipped school plays, unattended graduations. You could see her realizing that all those absences had added up to a permanent subtraction. The foundation she had arrogantly claimed was built on something deeper than biology. It was built on presence. It was built on the quiet, consistent acts of love that I had provided that she had chosen to be elsewhere for. She looked down at her plate, her face pale. There was nothing left for her to say. The weapons she had tried to use snide remarks, the claims of biological superiority had all turned to dust in her hands. The space she occupied at the table suddenly seemed small and insignificant. The conversation slowly started up again awkwardly. But the center of gravity had irrevocably shifted. He had drawn a line, and I was securely on one side of it, and she was alone on the other. We finished the meal. The goodbyes at the door were brief and hollow. As we walked to the car, the cool night air felt clean and new. He slipped his arm around my shoulders and gave me a squeeze. "I am sorry about that," he said softly. But Leo's focus wasn't on her. He came straight to my side, his tall frame a comforting presence. He leaned down and gave me a quick one-armed hug. "Hey, Mom, have you tried the cake? It's insane." He said it so naturally, so effortlessly. The word was just part of his everyday vocabulary when he spoke to me. I looked up at him, this young man I had helped raise, and I felt a surge of pride so strong, it almost brought me to tears. "Don't be," I said. "You have nothing to be sorry for." We drove home in a comfortable quiet. The confrontation was over, but its truth lingered. It wasn't a victory I had ever sought. I hadn't spent years loving him to win a point against her. I did it because he was my son. But in that moment, hearing him claim me, defend me, and define our relationship with such clarity, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known was possible. All the late nights, the bandaged knees, the edited essays, they weren't just moments, they were the bricks and mortar of a bond that no smirk, no snide remark, no claim of blood could ever break. She had given birth to him, but I had helped him become the man he was, and he knew it. That was the only thing that had ever really mattered. You know, I've spent a lot of time thinking about that moment. The moment she fell apart. It's easy to just call it a victory, to feel that surge of I don't know vindication. But it was more complicated than that. It was psychological. It was like watching a very precise, very slow-moving demolition. Every brick of her carefully constructed reality just crumbled at once. And it started with that smirk. I need to deconstruct that smirk. It wasn't just a smile. It was a tool. She used it like a weapon. The second she walked back into our lives, after years of being a ghost, it was this tight, condescending curve of the lips, always aimed directly at me, a nonverbal declaration of superiority. "I am the real mother," it said. "You're just the placeholder." But when you study it, when you really look past the surface, that smirk is a classic narcissistic tell. It's not a sign of confidence. It's a mask for a profound, deep-seated insecurity. She had to establish dominance immediately, because her entire position was fragile. She was the absentee parent she had left, and absentee parents, they have to rewrite history to live with themselves. They construct a narrative where they are the victim, or the misunderstood hero, where their absence was necessary, even noble. This rewriting allows them to avoid the crushing weight of guilt, and that avoidance breeds a kind of toxic arrogance. They return expecting a red carpet, expecting everything to be exactly as they left it, because admitting otherwise would mean confronting their own failure. So that smirk was her first line of defense. By treating me as a threat, a usurper, she never had to look inward. She never had to ask the real question. What did my absence cost me? My initial position. Just by existing, by being the one who was there for the scraped knees. And the science projects forced her to confront the ghost of her own failures. I was the living, breathing evidence of everything she had chosen not to do, and she hated me for it. The real power, though, wasn't in any reaction I could muster. It was in something much quieter, much stronger. It was in the power of consistent presence. This is where attachment theory becomes so clear. It's not some abstract concept. It's the very bedrock of a child's world. For years, I was the one who made breakfast. I was the one who checked for monsters under the bed. I was the one who waited up when he was out with friends. I was a constant, predictable source of safety and care. That reliability, that day in, day out showing up, it creates a secure attachment. It tells a child's nervous system on a primal level, you are safe, the world is predictable, I am here for you. The air around us went still. I saw Miranda's smile freeze on her face, It was like watching a crack appear in a sheet of ice. Her eyes darted from Leo's face to mine, then back again. The smirk was gone, completely erased. Now contrast that with his biological mother. Her presence was a series of explosions, grand gestures, expensive gifts, promises of trips that sometimes happened, and sometimes didn't. It was intense, but it was inconsistent. That kind of relationship creates an insecure attachment, an anxious one. A child never knows what to expect. Is today a day of lavish affection or distant silence? That unpredictability is terrifying for a child. It keeps them perpetually on edge, longing for the love, but bracing for the disappointment. So his loyalty to me was never a choice he had to consciously make. It wasn't a decision between his real mom and his stepmom. That's the language she used. But it's wrong. Loyalty for a child is a biological imperative. It flows naturally to the source of safety. It's not about blood, it's about who answers the cry in the night, who provides the steady calm harbor in the storm. His bond with me was the natural, inevitable outcome of me providing that safety. His bond with her was fraught with the anxiety of her inconsistency. She was the exciting, unpredictable ocean. I was the shore. The moment it all came to a head was a textbook case of cognitive dissonance. She had built this entire identity around being the wronged mother, the one whose place had been stolen in her mind. She was the hero of the story. She believed, truly believed, that once she was back, her son would see me for the imposter I was, and rush back into her arms. That was her reality. Then came the school play. He had the lead role. She showed up front and center, expecting a grand reunion. After the show, he ran off the stage. He was buzzing with adrenaline. And he didn't run to her. He ran straight to me. He threw his arms around my waist and buried his face in my shoulder and said, "Mom, did you see? I wasn't even nervous because I saw you right there." The word mom hung in the air, and I saw it happen. I saw the exact moment her worldview shattered. It was like watching a glass vase hit the floor in slow motion. First, there was a split second of confusion. Her brain couldn't process the information. This evidence, your son, calling me mom, seeking comfort from me, was completely incompatible with her narrative. It created a psychological conflict so intense it was physically unbearable. Her face went blank. The smirk vanished, replaced by a look of pure, uncomprehending shock. Then her body just gave up. She didn't faint, but she collapsed into a chair nearby, as if her bones had turned to water. That collapse was the physical manifestation of cognitive dissonance. Her mind's defense mechanisms, the walls she had built, just broke. The proof was undeniable, and it was standing right in front of her, hugging the woman she considered a rival. There was no way to explain it away. Her son's love for me was the fact that broke her. For me in that moment, there was a profound sense of healing and validation. Being a step-parent is a unique kind of emotional labor. You give all the love, you do all the work, but you're constantly shadowed by this feeling of being less than. You fight this silent battle against an invisible standard. You wonder if your love counts, if it's real, if it's enough. You sacrifice, and you always have in the back of your mind that you might just be a temporary fixture. That moment, that simple unconscious affirmation from him, vindicated every single one of those days. The sick days, the homework battles, the times I bit my tongue when I wanted to criticize her, the emotional energy I poured into building him up. It was all there in that hug. It validated my role not as a substitute, but as a true parent. The psychological truth, the one that every child development expert will tell you, is that children bond with those who nurture them. It's that simple. The act of Leo, completely oblivious to the seismic shift he had just caused, continued, "Seriously, you have to get a piece before Uncle David hogs it all." He squeezed my shoulder. "I am gonna go find Dad. See if he'll let me have the keys to take some friends for a drive later." Nurturing, the feeding, the comforting, the guiding, that is what builds parent-child bonds. Biology may give you a starting point, but it's presence that builds the relationship. Her victory wasn't over her as a person, not really. It was the victory of a psychological truth over a convenient fiction. It was the victory of consistent day-to-day love over sporadic, dramatic gestures. She wasn't defeated by me. She was defeated by the reality of the bond I had built through years of quiet, steadfast effort. And in seeing her defeat, I finally understood that I had never been in a competition. I had simply been building a home, and he, in choosing that home, was just acting on most fundamental human instinct. There is to go where you feel safe, to love the one who makes you feel seen. That's the psychology behind it. It's not about winning, it's about providing a foundation so solid that when the winds of instability blow, it's the only place left to stand. It feels a little strange to be talking. I usually just listen, but hearing everyone else share these past few weeks, it's like you're all reading pages from my own diary. The feeling of being a permanent guest in a home. You're supposed to help run the constant quiet comparisons, the whispered phone calls with the ex that leave your husband tense for hours, that desperate aching hope that maybe just maybe the child will see you as more than just the person who married their dad. I've felt like an outsider for so long. You all know the feeling. You learn the routines, you memorize the food allergies, you show up for every school play and soccer game. But there's this invisible wall. You're caring for a heart that has a primary address. Somewhere else. It's a special kind of loneliness, isn't it, to love someone so much, who is by no fault of their own, a little bit out of reach. But something happened last weekend, and it was so profound for me. I thought maybe sharing it might, well, I don't know, maybe it'll mean something to someone else here. It was my in-laws' 50th wedding anniversary, a huge party at a nice hotel ballroom. The whole family was there, aunts, uncles, cousins, everyone. I'd spent weeks helping my husband plan it. It was a big deal. We were all dressed up, feeling good. My stepson Liam, he's 15, he was even wearing a tie, complaining the whole time. But in that funny way teenagers do. The party was in full swing, music, laughter, that gentle hum of a family celebration. And then the door opened, and she walked in, my husband's ex-wife, Liam's mom. She hadn't been invited. My husband was very clear about that it was a family event. And given the history, it was better this way. But one of his aunts, thinking she was being kind, had extended an invitation without telling us. She made an entrance, you know how she does, that a dress just a little too formal for the occasion, scanning the room like she was looking for someone. And then her eyes landed on us, on me specifically. And she gave this small, tight smile. It wasn't a friendly smile. It was a challenge, a reminder. It was her saying, without a single word, I belong here, you're the replacement. I felt my own smile freeze on my face. My husband squeezed my hand. His knuckles white. The air around our little group just went cold. She glided over all false sweetness, darling, she said, kissing my husband on the cheek. Then she turned to Liam, my handsome boy, come, let's get a picture, just the two of us for old time's sake. She reached for his arm, trying to pull him away from our little circle. That phrase, just the two of us, it was like a weapon. It was meant to exclude me, to re-establish the old hierarchy right in front of everyone. Be careful, I said automatically, my voice soft. And Liam, he hesitated for a second. My heart just sank. I thought, here it is, the moment where biology wins, where all the years of trying just evaporate. He looked at his mom, then he looked at me, and he gently pulled his arm back, just a little. It was so polite but so firm. Actually, Mom, he said, his voice clear, not angry, just sure, I want a picture with my mom too. And for a second, his mother's face lit up. She thought he meant her. But then Liam turned and put his arm around my shoulders. He pulled me into the frame. I mean this one, he said. The look on her face, it was like watching a building collapse in slow motion. The confident smile just melted. There was confusion. First, then this dawning horror. The aunt who had invited her had her phone out ready to take the photo. But she just froze too. The whole family group nearby had gone quiet. You could hear the party happening around us. But our little bubble was utterly silent. His mother recovered a little. She forced a laugh. It sounded brittle. Oh honey, that's sweet, but I am your mom. And Liam, God, he was so calm. He looked right at her. I know, Mom, but she's my mom too. It was like he'd dropped a bomb, a quiet, respectful bomb, but a bomb nonetheless. His mother just stared. I think I stopped breathing. And then he kept going. He looked around at the family members who were listening. I actually wanted to tell you all, he said, his voice getting a little louder, a little more proud. I got the lead in the school play, the winter musical. It's a really big part. There were murmurs of congratulations. His mother tried to jump in to reclaim the moment. That's wonderful, sweetie, you've always been so talented. But Liam wasn't finished. He looked right at me. Yeah. And I wouldn't have even tried out if it wasn't for her. He nodded toward me. She's the one who found the audition notice. She drove me to the library every weekend for a month to research the part. She practiced lines with me every night after dinner, even when I was grumpy and wanted to quit. She believed I could do it before I even believed it myself. Always am, he grinned, and then as an afterthought turned to Miranda. Hey Miranda, glad you could make it. And then he was gone, swallowed back up by the crowd. He turned back to his mother. So yeah, I want her in the picture. The silence that followed was thick, but then it broke not with awkwardness, but with this wave of pure warm support. His grandmother, my mother-in-law, came over and put her arm around me. His aunts were nodding, smiling at me with genuine approval. My husband's hand on my back was firm, steadying the aunt with the phone, said, "Okay, everyone smile." And she took the picture. Liam's arm was tight around me. I was trying so hard not to cry. His mother, she just stood there for a moment, completely sidelined. The triumph was gone from her face, replaced by something hollow. She muttered something about needing a drink, and walked away. The challenge was over, and she had lost. In that moment, it wasn't about winning against her. It wasn't a victory over another person. It was a validation. It was Liam in front of everyone who mattered, defining our relationship on his own terms. He was claiming me not as a replacement, but as an addition, as someone who had earned a title he chose to give. And that's the thing I've been turning over in my head all week. We fight so hard for these small moments of acceptance, for a shred of acknowledgement. We do the laundry, we pack the lunches. We sit through the boring parent-teacher conferences. We bite our tongues when the ex-wife makes a snide remark. We do all this work in the quiet, hoping it adds up to something. And you never really know if it does. You can't see the foundation you're building brick by brick, day by day. But sometimes you get a moment like that, a moment where the child turns around and says, "I see you, I see all the quiet work." And it matters. It's not about them loving their biological parent any less. It's about their heart having the capacity to love more, to make room. So I'm standing here sharing this with you all because I know how long the road feels. I know how isolating it can be. You wonder if you're crazy for signing up for this. You wonder if the heartache is worth it. And I'm here to tell you from the other side of one single perfect moment that it is. It absolutely is. The bond you're building, it's not flashy. It's not built on grand gestures or trying to compete. It's built on showing up, on being consistently, reliably, unconditionally there. It's built in the car rides, listening to terrible music, and helping with the science project at the last minute, and remembering that they hate mushrooms on their pizza. It's built on love that isn't demanded, but offered, and that kind of love, it's sturdy, it's real. And eventually, it builds something that no amount of biology or arrogance can ever break. I was cleaning his room. He's 16 now, so he mostly does it himself. But sometimes, I go in to gather the stray mugs, or open a window. It was tucked under a stack of textbooks on his desk. Just a simple piece of notebook paper folded in half. His name was written on the front, but underneath, in his slightly messy handwriting, it said, "For Mom." I saw her reflection first in the glass front of a large awards case. Miranda, polished to a high shine, wearing a dress that probably cost more than my car. She moved through the crowd with an easy familiarity, kissing relatives I'd only ever seen in photographs. She was holding court. The prodigal mother returned for the big day. And then her eyes, sharp and assessing, scanned the room and landed directly on me. It was just for a second, but it was enough. A slow, deliberate smirk curled the corner of her mouth. The silence he left behind was deafening. Miranda was just staring at me, her champagne flute held so tightly. I thought the stem might snap. The color had drained from her face. Confusion was rapidly giving way to something else, something raw and horrified. She was putting the pieces together, and the picture they formed was dismantling her entire reality. My breath caught. He calls me Mom, he has for years. But seeing it written down just like that, it's different. It feels more permanent. I sat on the edge of his bed, the worn-out comforter familiar under my hands, and I unfolded the paper. It was a letter not for a class he'd written. That at the top, "This isn't for school. I just wanted to write it." He started by thanking me for helping him with his college applications. He said I was the only one who understood how stressed he was about the essay, but then it deepened. He wrote about specific things, little things. I'd forgotten the time he had the flu in 3rd grade. And I stayed up all night reading Harry Potter to him, doing all the voices, even when my own throat was sore. He remembered the exact pattern on the pajamas I was wearing. He wrote about how I taught him to ride a bike, how I ran alongside him, my hand on the seat, and how I didn't let go until he shouted that he was doing it. He was really doing it. He said he knew I was still running behind him for a few seconds just to make sure. He called me his anchor. He said that while other kids' families were changing, I was the constant. He wrote about the first time he introduced me to a friend as his mom, and how it felt completely natural, like there had never been any other truth. The last line was, "You didn't just marry my dad, you chose me, and I will always, always choose you as my mother." I held that piece of paper, and I cried quietly sitting there in his room surrounded by his things. I cried for the little boy he was. And the young man he's becoming. I cried out of a happiness so profound it felt like a physical ache. I folded the letter back up exactly along its original creases, and I put it in the top drawer of my dresser underneath my sweaters. It was my secret, my most precious possession, a testament to a life built together word by word, year by year. The dinner was my idea, a stupid, hopeful idea. His father thought it would be nice to have a family meal before graduation to include everyone. His ex-wife Sarah was in town. She flies in a couple times a year, makes a big show of being a mother, and then leaves again. I thought maybe this time will be different, maybe we can be civil for his sake. It started off okay, a little strained. But okay, she was talking about his early childhood, telling stories I'd heard 100 times, stories where she was the star. Then she looked right at me, that familiar cold smirk. She said, "It must be so hard for you trying to fill a role that's just innate. You can't really understand the bond, can you? It's biological." I just looked down at my plate. I've heard it all before, the comments about not having kids of my own, the subtle digs about me just being the stepmom. I've learned to let it wash over me. My reward is his smile in the morning, his trust, his love. That's what I told myself. But she kept going. She became more aggressive, her voice sharp. "What could you possibly know about real motherly instincts? You moved into a ready-made family. You're a playing house." My husband tried to intervene to change the subject, but she talked right over him. She was staring at me, waiting for a reaction. I felt my face get hot. I gripped my fork so tightly my knuckles were white. I was about to say something to finally defend myself after all these years, but I didn't have to. "Mom," she finally whispered the word, sounding foreign and broken on her lips. "He called you Mom." He pushed his chair back. It made a scraping sound on the floor. Everyone went quiet. He was so calm. He said, "I have something to say." He looked at his biological mother, and there was no anger in his eyes, just a deep, resolute sadness. Then he looked at me, and I saw an apology there, and a fierce kind of love. He didn't go to his room. He had memorized it. He stood there beside the dinner table with the half-eaten food and the tense silence, and he began to speak. He recited my letter word for word. He started with the college applications. Then he talked about the flu, about the Harry Potter voices. He described the bike, the feeling of the wind. And knowing I was still there behind him, he talked about me being his anchor. He said, "You are my constant." His voice never wavered. It was clear and strong, and filled the entire room. With every sentence I watched Sarah's face change. The smirk vanished, first replaced by confusion. Then as he kept going, detailing memories she had no part in, moments of tenderness and care that were exclusively mine, her face began to fall. It was a slow collapse. The confidence drained away, and what was left was a dawning, painful understanding. She was hearing the story of her son's life, a story where she was a guest appearance, and I was the main character. He was holding up a mirror to her absenteeism. Reflection was brutal. He wasn't yelling. He was just stating facts, his facts, the truth of his childhood, as he had lived it, and his truth was me. When he said the last part, "You chose me, and I will always choose you as my mother," it was like a final, quiet verdict. There was nothing left to say. The words hung in the air, more powerful than any argument I could have ever made. Sarah just stared at him. Her mouth was slightly open. She looked from him to me, and I saw it click into place, the full weight of what she had lost. It wasn't just time. It was the intimacy, the trust, the day-to-day fabric of being a parent. She had forfeited the right to be called his mother in any way that truly mattered. The evidence was standing right in front of her, speaking in his own voice. Her own son had just presented the most effective, devastating rebuttal to every claim she had ever made. She didn't say a word. She just stood up, her chair nearly tipping over behind her. Her face was pale. She looked utterly defeated, hollowed out. She walked out of the dining room, and a moment later, we heard the front door close softly. There was no drama, no slamming door. It was a quiet, total surrender. The silence she left behind was thick, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was a silence of respect. My husband reached over and put his hand on mine, squeezing it tightly. His eyes were shiny. He didn't need to say anything. Our son sat back down. He looked at me and gave me a small, tired smile. "I meant it," he said quietly. In that moment, watching my husband's grateful face and my son's steady gaze, I realized something. The greatest reward wasn't her defeat. It wasn't seeing her walk away. That felt insignificant. The real victory, the profound, life-altering prize, was right here at this table. It was the sincere, freely given love of this incredible young man. It was the knowledge that I had done right by him, that my love had been felt and understood and cherished so deeply, that he felt compelled to document it, to give it back. I met her gaze. There was no triumph in me, no desire to gloat. This wasn't a victory lap. It was just the simple, unvarnished truth. Yes, I said, my voice quiet, but clear. He's called me that for years now. Me in his own words. The letter wasn't just a secret for me anymore, it had become a public declaration. But more than that, it was a bond solidified. It was proof that family isn't just about biology. It's about showing up, it's about running beside the bike. Even when you're tired, it's about reading the same chapter for the 10th time, because it brings comfort. It's about choosing each other every single day. And he had chosen me, he had written it down, and then he had stood up and said it out loud for the whole world to hear. No victory over an unpleasant woman could ever compare to that. The letter, his words, were the ultimate testament. They were everything. She shook her head slowly, a denial that had no strength behind it. But he was 10, he was 10, when things changed. He barely knew you. I know, I said. He was 10, and he was hurting and scared. His whole world had fallen apart. I paused, choosing my words carefully. This wasn't about blaming her for the choices she made, it was about honoring the journey Leo and I had been on together. It took time, a lot of time. There were sleepless nights and homework battles and moments of anger where he didn't know who to be mad at. I was just the person who was there. I made his lunches. I helped him study for his algebra tests. I held him when he cried after his first heartbreak. I was there for the driver's permit and the first shave and all the tiny, ordinary moments that make up a life. I've had the privilege of raising him since he was 10. The words hung in the air between us, solid and immovable. I saw the full impact hit her. It wasn't just about a title, it was about everything. That title represented the thousands of small actions, the daily grind of love, the sheer relentless presence required to earn it. Her polished confidence shattered completely, her shoulders slumped, and she looked suddenly smaller, older. The smirk was a distant memory, replaced by a look of profound, gut-wrenching loss. She opened her mouth to say something, but no sound came out. She just stared at me, really seeing me for the first time, and I saw the dawning, terrible realization in her eyes. I hadn't just married her ex-husband, I had raised her son. She took an unsteady step backward, her hand fluttering to her chest. The composure shed, worn like armor, was gone. She was exposed, vulnerable, and utterly defeated. She didn't say another word, she just turned and walked away, a ghost, moving through the vibrant party, leaving a trail of silence in her wake. I watched her go, and I felt quite a deep, settling calm. This wasn't the explosive confrontation I'd sometimes feared. It was a quiet acknowledgement, a shift in the universe that had been years in the making. Later, I saw Leo with his father laughing about something, and he caught my eye from across the room and gave me a little wave. His love wasn't a performance. It wasn't something he had to think about. It was just there, a fundamental part of who he was and who we were together. That was the real victory. Not. It wasn't hostile, not exactly. It was worse, it was dismissive. It said, I see you, their temporary fixture, the placeholder. Then she looked away, back to her audience, and the moment passed, but the message had been received. Her retreat, but his wave. In the quiet of the car ride home, the adrenaline finally faded, and I was left with my thoughts. The image of Miranda's crumbling face stayed with me. I didn't feel happy about her pain. How could I? It was a pain born from the realization of a profound loss. But I also felt a sense of closure. For years, her shadow had loomed, the specter of the real mother. But today that shadow had been dispelled by the simple, solid reality of my relationship with Leo. I thought about those early years, the hesitant boy who would flinch if I moved too suddenly, the silent car rides, the closed bedroom door. It was hard, thankless work some days. There were moments I doubted everything, wondering if I was just a temporary caretaker, if I would ever be more than the woman married to his dad. But I showed up day after day. I learned to make his favorite meatloaf the way his grandmother had taught him. I sat through terrible cartoons. Because he liked the company, I learned the names of his friends and which teachers he hated, and what he wanted for his birthday. I was just there, consistently, reliably there. And slowly, so slowly, I almost didn't notice it happening. The wall came down, the flinching stopped, the car rides filled with chatter about school and sports. The bedroom door was left open. The title of mom wasn't something I ever asked for. It was a gift he gave me one day, completely out of the blue. He was 13, and he'd had a terrible fight with his dad. He stormed up to his room, and I went up a while later with a plate of food, expecting to be told to go away. But he opened the door, his face streaked with tears. And he just said, "Thanks, Mom," then he took the plate and closed the door again. I stood there in the hallway, my own eyes filling with tears. That was the moment I knew all the effort, all the doubt, it had been worth it. I had earned my place. Family isn't a contract written in blood, it's a daily practice. It's showing up when it's hard, it's choosing to love actively and deliberately, especially when you're not sure you're being loved back. Biology gives you a starting point, but it doesn't guarantee a finish. Love and action do. That I had chosen to act, I had chosen to love him, and in return he had chosen to call me Mom. As for Miranda, I felt a complicated mix of emotions, pity for sure, to stand there and realize that the child you brought into the world sees another woman as his primary source of comfort, his anchor. That's a specific kind of heartbreak, but also a sense that a chapter had finally closed. Her arrogance, her smugness, it had all been a shield against this very truth. The real loss was hers. She had missed it all: the school plays, the science fair projects, the bedtime stories, the teenage angst. She had chosen different path, and the consequence was that she became a guest at his graduation, while I was the one he called Mom. There was no anger left in me towards her, just a quiet acknowledgement that the scales had been balanced not by my hand, but by time and love. The life she had left behind had gone on without her, and it had built something beautiful and strong in her absence. And I had got to be a part of it. I got to be his mom, and no smirk, no dismissive glance could ever take that away. There was always an empty chair at the table, even when the three of us were sitting down for dinner. His little face, so serious, my husband trying so hard to make everything feel normal. The absence was a physical presence. It was the space where she was supposed to be. She didn't leave because of a tragedy, not in the usual sense. There was no accident, no illness. She just left. She packed a suitcase one afternoon, while Leo was at school, and told my husband David that this life, this town, this role of... My stomach tightened. I'd been preparing for this moment for weeks, playing out different scenarios in my head. I'd told myself it didn't matter, that her opinion was a relic from a life Leo, our son, had long since outgrown. But standing here in this room full of his blood relatives, her presence felt like a judgment. I was the second wife, the stepmother, a title that always felt like it had an asterisk next to it. I took a slow breath, focusing on the reason we were all here: Leo in his cap and gown, his mother. It was all suffocating her. She said she needed to find herself. She found herself 1,000 miles away with a new man and a new start, and she left the pieces of her old life for someone else to sweep up. That someone else was me. I met David about a year after the dust had settled, which is a generous way of saying after the crater. She left, had stopped actively smoking. Leo was 7, a little boy with eyes that were far too old for his face. He was a fortress. He'd built these walls around himself brick by brick, and you could see the hurt he used as mortar. He wouldn't let anyone in, not his father, and certainly not me, the woman trying to take his mother's place. I remember the first time I tried make him pancakes on a Saturday morning. His mother used to make them. David told me. Leo took one look at the stack I put in front of him, his little jaw set, and he said, "My mom makes them better." Then he pushed the plate away. It wasn't about the pancakes. It was a test he was seeing if I would break, if I would get angry, if I would leave too. And I made a decision right then, standing in that sunny kitchen with the scent of vanilla hanging in the air. I decided that I would love him. It was a conscious choice, a commitment. I wasn't going to replace her. How could I? But I could be something else. I could be steady. I could be present. I could be the rock he could crash against, until his waves of anger and grief finally calmed. The early struggles were a daily battle, helping him with his homework, and him refusing to speak to me for the entire hour, tucking him in at night, and him turning his face to the wall. It was 1,000 small rejections, each one a little pinprick to the heart. But I just kept showing up. I made his lunch every day. I sat in the audience at his school plays. Even when he pretended not to see me, I was just there. The long road of building a family wasn't paved with grand gestures. It was laid down with tiny, ordinary moments. It was the November he got the flu, a high fever that had him shaking in his bed. David was away on a business trip, and it was just me. I stayed up all night, sitting on the floor next to his bed, replacing the cool cloth on his forehead, in his delirious state, half asleep and burning up. He grabbed my hand and held it tight. He didn't call me Mom. He didn't say anything, but he held on like I was the only thing keeping him from floating away. That was a crack in the fortress wall. Then there was the bike. He was 9, and all his friends were already riding without training wheels. He was too proud to ask for help, but I could see the frustration building. One Saturday, I just wheeled the bike out to the quiet cul-de-sac. I didn't make a big deal of it, I just said, "All right, let's figure this out." I held the seat running alongside him, my back aching, reassuring him over and over that I wouldn't let go. And then, without me realizing, he was ready. I did let go. He pedaled away, wobbling at first, then finding his balance, riding all the way to the end of the street. When he turned around and came back, his face was transformed. It wasn't just triumph, it was pure, unadulterated joy. He skidded to a stop in front of me, breathless. And he said, "Did you see that?" And I said, "I saw. You were amazing in that moment." I wasn't the stepmother. I was just the person who was there for his victory. The internal conflicts never fully went away. On Mother's Day he'd make me a card at school, but I'd see him looking a little sad, wondering I knew about her. I had to manage my own insecurities. Was I enough when he was upset? Would he always deep down wish for her? I never badmouthed her. I made a promise to myself about that. I kept a small box of her photos for him, telling him she was his mother, and that it was okay to love her and miss her. I think that fairness, that respect for the smile so bright and genuine as he talked with his friends, that was what mattered. Complicated truth of his heart is what finally won his trust. The transformation happened so slowly, I almost missed it. The withdrawn, hurt little boy blossomed. He became a teenager with a quick wit and a surprising kindness. He'd stick up for kids at school who were being picked on. He started joining us for movie nights, voluntarily, even laughing at my husband's terrible jokes. And then the memory I hold closer than any other: he was 14. We were in the car driving home from soccer practice. It was just a normal conversation about his day, about a goal he'd nearly scored. The conversation lulled, and he was looking out the window. Then quietly, almost as if he was commenting on the weather, he said, "Love you, Mom." He didn't stammer, he didn't correct himself. He just said it. I had to keep my eyes on the road, but tears blurred my vision. I managed to say, "I love you too, Leo." That was the moment the family we had built felt real, solid, and entirely our own. The reunion happened at his high school graduation. It was a bright, sunny day in the football stadium. We were so proud, clapping as he walked across the stage in his cap and gown, this confident, handsome young man he'd become. And then, as the crowd was milling about afterwards, I saw her. A decade had passed, but I knew her immediately. She was standing near the edge of the field, looking around, a faint, almost smug smirk on her face. She was dressed like she was going to a cocktail party, not a graduation. She expected to find a scene. I think she expected to see the struggling single father and the wounded little boy shed left behind. She expected to sweep in and see the damage, to maybe even be welcomed as the prodigal mother returned. David saw her too, and his arm tightened around my waist. Leo was laughing with his friends a few feet away. She spotted him, and her smirk widened. She walked over, confident, and placed a hand on his arm. "Leo, oh my God, look at you." Her voice was too loud, too theatrical. Leo turned. His smile didn't vanish, but it changed. It became polite, reserved, the kind of smile you give a distant relative you haven't seen in years. "Hello, Sarah," he said, his voice calm, and even he introduced her to his friends. "This is my biological mother." The word biological hung in the air, a clinical distancing term. He wasn't being cruel, he was just stating a fact. Then he turned back to us. His whole demeanor shifted, the formality melted away. He walked over to me and wrapped his arms around me in a huge bear hug, his cap knocking awkwardly against my head. "We did it, Mom," he murmured into my shoulder. I could feel the solid strength of him, this man-child I had helped raise. I held him tight, my eyes meeting Sarah's over his shoulder. Her smirk was gone, completely wiped away. In its place was a dawning, horrified understanding. She was looking at a bond so deep, so natural, so full of unspoken history and love that it was like a force field around us. She saw the way he looked at me with absolute trust and affection, and the way he had looked at her, like a pleasantly surprising acquaintance. She was a stranger, a ghost, who had arrived at the feast a decade too late. The shock on her face was the quietest, most profound vindication I have ever known. I felt no triumph, not in the way you might think. There was no desire to gloat, no need for revenge. Watching her face fall, seeing her realize the immense and irreplaceable journey she had missed, I felt a profound sense of peace. My vindication wasn't about her failure. It was about our success. It was the quiet, solid knowledge that love is not a title you are given, but a story you build day by day, brick by brick. It's in the sleepless nights, the scraped knees, the homework struggles, the whispered fears, and the shared. The ceremony had been a blur of names and applause. Now, during the reception, the real social minefield began. I was near the dessert table, debating the merits of chocolate cake versus a fruit tart. when I heard her voice right behind me. Well, isn't this a lovely spread? Laughter. Motherhood isn't about biology. It's about showing up. It's about choosing to love fiercely and consistently, even when it's hard, especially when it's hard. She missed it all. She missed watching him become this incredible person. She missed the privilege of being his safe place. And as I held my Sanmi Sanan, that crowded stadium, I knew that her loss was immeasurable. I had no anger left for her. How could I? She gave me the greatest gift of my life. Even if she never meant to, she gave me the chance to be a mother. And I took that chance. I built a life on a foundation of chosen love. And that structure is stronger than any bond of mere obligation. The empty chair at our table was filled long ago. It's my chair, and it always will be. Growing up, I had two mothers. That's the simplest way to put it. But it was never simple for me. One was a story, a collection of faded photographs, and a voice on the phone a few times a year, my biological mother. The other was a constant presence. The woman who made my breakfast, helped with my homework, and sat in the audience at every school play, even the terrible ones. My stepmother. For a long time, I was angry. I think all kids in that situation feel a kind of loyalty to the parent, who isn't there, a strange misplaced protectiveness. I tested my stepmother constantly. I'd refuse to eat the meals she cooked. I'd tell her she wasn't my real mom. I'd leave my room a mess, just to see if she'd clean it, to prove to myself that she was just pretending. I pushed her away as hard as I could, waiting for her to leave, just like the first one, had I thought it was inevitable. But she never did. She never even flinched. She'd just sigh. Maybe her eyes would get a little sad, and she'd say, "That's okay, I still love you." And she'd heat up the dinner. I'd refused and leave it outside my door. She'd quietly fold my clothes and put them on my chair. Her love wasn't loud or dramatic. It was quiet, patient, and relentless. It was like the ocean wearing away at a rock slowly without me even noticing. It changed my shape. The shift didn't happen overnight. It was in 1,000 small moments. It was her remembering that I hated peas, but loved green beans. It was her staying up with me all night when I had the flu, wiping my forehead with a cool cloth. It was the way she'd argue with my dad to let me stay out a little later, or get that video game I wanted, because she understood what it felt like to be a kid. She was on my team. She was my advocate. I remember one specific afternoon. I must have been about 14. I'd had a huge fight with my best friend at school, and I came home and slammed my door, just fuming. She knocked, and I told her to go away. She came in anyway, and just sat on the edge of my bed. She didn't say anything for a long time. Then she said, "It hurts, doesn't it, feeling like someone you trust has let you down?" And she didn't try to give me advice. She just acknowledged the pain. And in that moment, I didn't see a stepmother trying to force a connection. I saw a mom, my mom, the woman who actually knew me, who saw the real hurt I was feeling, and didn't try to minimize it or fix it, but just sat with me in it. That was the turning point. After that, the wall was gone. She wasn't a replacement anymore. She was the real thing. The idea started forming in my mind during my senior year of high school. Graduation was coming up. I knew my biological mother would be there. She never missed the big public events, the ones where she could show up, look the part, and get credit for a job she didn't do. She'd be there with her camera and her proud smile. And it made me feel sick. I thought about all the years, all the moments my stepmother had been there, for without any fanfare, the early morning drives to practice, the forgotten permission slips. She'd rush. I turned. Miranda was standing there, a glass of champagne in her hand, her smile perfectly calibrated to be both polite and condescending. "It's good to see you," she said, though her tone suggested the exact opposite. "You've settled in nicely to school." The way she'd listened to me talk about my dumb teenage problems for hours. She deserved the recognition. She deserved to be honored. I decided I was going to do it at graduation in front of everyone. I was going to call her mom, not as a slip of the tongue, but as a deliberate, conscious choice. I was going to give her the title she had more than earned. I talked to my dad about it first. I was nervous, worried he might feel it was a betrayal of my biological mother. But he just put his hand on my shoulder and smiled, this sad, proud smile. He said, "She's earned it 10 times over, son. I think it's a wonderful idea." His support made me feel solid, like my feet were firmly on the ground. Then, a few nights before the ceremony, I sat down with my stepmother in the living room. I told her my plan. I said, "At graduation, when I get my diploma, I want to say something to you. I want everyone to know." She got tears in her eyes immediately, but she shook her head. "You don't have to do that," she said. "I know how you feel. That's all that matters." But I insisted. I told her, It wasn't just for her, it was for me too. I needed to say it out loud in front of the world, especially in front of my biological mother. I needed to claim my real family. She finally agreed, and we hugged, and I felt this incredible sense of peace. The decision was made. Graduation day was a blur of putting on the cap and gown, lining up with my classmates. The auditorium was packed, hot and buzzing with excitement. I could see my dad's bald spot shining under the lights, and next to him my stepmother. She looked nervous, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. And then I saw her a few rows back, my biological mother. She was dressed to impress, already smiling this wide, performative smile for the cameras around her. She caught my eye and gave me a little wave, a smug look on her face that said, "That's my boy." That look, that assumption of a bond that didn't exist, just solidified everything for me. Any last bit of doubt vanished. The ceremony dragged on, name after name. Finally, they called mine. I walked across the stage, shook the principal's hand, and took the diploma. This was it, the microphone was right there. I turned towards the section where my family was sitting. I could feel hundreds of eyes on me. My heart was pounding in my chest, so loud I could barely hear anything else. I looked directly at my stepmother. I saw her lean forward, her face full of anticipation and love. I took a deep breath and spoke into the microphone. My voice was clear and steady, much stronger than I felt inside. "I just want to say," I started, "that this achievement isn't just mine. There's one person who has been my rock through all of it." I paused, making sure every word landed. "This is for you, Mom. Thank you for everything." I didn't say her name. I didn't need to. Everyone who mattered knew exactly who I was talking about. The camera that was projecting the ceremony onto a big screen, almost as if on cue, swung away from me. It found my stepmother's face first. Her hands flew to her mouth and tears just streamed down her cheeks. It wasn't a sad cry. It was a release, a flood of years of love and sacrifice finally being acknowledged in the most public way possible. That was the reaction I wanted. That was the picture I will. "Thank you, Miranda," I said, keeping my voice even. "It's a beautiful day for Leo. Carry with me forever." Then the camera, perhaps guided by some cruel poetic instinct, panned to my biological mother. The screen showed her face in perfect high-definition clarity. The smug smile was still there, for a second frozen, as her brain processed what had just happened. Then it began to dissolve. It wasn't a slow fade, it was like watching a building collapse. The smile twisted into a confused frown, then into a mask of stunned silence. Her eyes widened, and you could see the painful realization dawning in them. She looked from me back to my stepmother, and then down at her lap. The camera lingered for a moment too long, capturing the exact second she understood that she was a guest at this celebration, not a guest of honor. She had the title of mother, but she hadn't done the work, and now everyone knew it. The applause from the audience was loud, but for me everything else was muffled. I walked off the stage, my legs feeling like jelly. All I could see was the joyful, tear-streaked face of the woman who had chosen me every single day. After the ceremony, there was the usual chaos of families mingling on the football field. My stepmother, my mom, found me first. She didn't say anything, she just hugged me tighter than she ever had before. And I hugged her back. My dad was beaming his arm around both of us. It was perfect. And then, of course, my biological mother approached. She had composed herself, but her eyes were red. She tried to give me a hug, but it was stiff and awkward. That was quite a speech. She said, her voice thin, "I am happy for you." There was a long, uncomfortable pause. Then she added, "I am still your mother, you know." I looked at her, and I felt no anger, only a deep, profound sense of clarity. This was the moment I had to be firm. "I know," I said calmly. "But she raised me. She is my mom." The words felt true and right coming out of my mouth. She flinched a little, nodded slowly, and then just turned and walked away into the crowd. I watched her go, and I didn't feel guilt. I felt relief. It was like finally putting down a heavy weight I'd been carrying for years. The strength that gave me was incredible. I had spoken my truth, and the world hadn't ended. In fact, it felt like it had just begun. It clarified everything. Family isn't a title you get from a blood test. It's not about who brought you into the world, it's about who shows up in that world for you. It's about who is there in the quiet, ordinary, unglamorous moments. It's about who wipes your tears, celebrates your small victories, and loves you not because they have to, but because they choose to, day after day. After day, that's what makes a mom, and that day, I finally gave mine the name she deserved. The end of my first marriage felt less like a clean break, and more like a collapse. The dust settled, and there I was standing in the rubble with my son Jamie. He was only 6, a little boy, whose entire world had just been demolished. I remember tucking him in at night, and he'd just stare at the ceiling, his small face so still, so quiet he stopped asking when his mom was coming back. That was the worst part, the silence, where there should have been questions. I was a father, but I felt like a medic on it. Isn't it just? She took a sip of her drink, her eyes sweeping over me. He's grown into such a remarkable young man. It's amazing really how he's thrived, a testament to good genes. I suppose the barb was subtle, but it landed, a reminder that she was the source of those genes, the architect of his very existence. Battlefield, just trying to stop the bleeding with no idea how to heal the wound. Every day was a lesson in failure. I burned dinners. I forgot about picture day. I'd lie awake wondering if I was failing him completely, if the best I could offer was just damage control. Co-parenting was a joke, a cruel one. My ex-wife Sarah would breeze in and out of Jamie's life like a tourist shed, make a grand promise for a weekend trip, and then cancel at the last minute. Because something better came up, the phone would ring, and I'd see Jamie's face light up only to watch it dim just as quickly when he heard her excuses. I'd have to stand there holding the phone, making up some lie to soften the blow. Mom's just really busy with work, buddy. Shell, make it up to you. I hated myself for those lies. I was becoming a co-conspirator in his disappointment. She'd show up for a holiday with extravagant, guilt-laden presents, turning our quiet home into a chaotic pit stop, before disappearing again, leaving a fresh wave of confusion in her wake. It was a special kind of torture, watching your child learn that love is conditional and unreliable. Then I met you, not you as my wife, not yet, but you as this presence. It was at a school function. Jamie had clung to my leg as usual, and you were there with a niece. I saw you kneel down to talk to him, not in that high-pitched voice people use with kids, but just as yourself. You asked him about his drawing, and he, for the first time in months, actually mumbled an answer. It was a tiny thing, a flicker, but I saw it. I saw you see it too. You didn't push, you just were there. Watching you with Jamie in those early months was like watching a master restorer work on a priceless, fragile painting. You had this infinite patience. You never tried to force him to call you anything. You never tried to replace his mother. You just built a new space for yourself in his life, brick by brick. You remembered his favorite superhero. You learned how to make his grilled cheese just right. You sat through the same cartoon movie a dozen times. Without a sigh, it was in the quiet moments I saw the real change. The way he started to lean against you on the couch, how he'd leave a drawing on the kitchen table for you to find. You weren't erasing the hurt, but you were gently, patiently building something new and strong right alongside it. My gratitude for you was a physical thing, a weight in my chest that was equal parts awe and relief. You were healing my son's heart, and in doing so you were healing a part of me I thought was broken forever. Of course, Sarah couldn't let that piece exist without casting a shadow. Her visits became less about seeing Jamie and more about performing an inspection. She'd sit in our living room, her eyes scanning for cracks in the foundation you'd helped us build. Her comments were always coated in a thin layer of sweetness, but the poison was right there underneath. Oh, you cut his hair, it's different. Or I see you've let him watch that show. I was always very strict about screen time. She'd look right at you with this little a look that said, you're just the babysitter. Ill always be his real mother. Every time I'd feel this heat rise in my chest, my fists would clench. I wanted to stand up and roar to tell her exactly what her absence had cost him, and exactly what your presence had given him. But I held back, partly because I didn't want to make a scene in front of Jamie, but mostly because I saw the way you handled it. You'd just give a small, calm smile. You never took the bait. You'd redirect the conversation to something Jamie was proud of, like a good grade or a goal he scored in soccer. You were building a fortress around our little family, not with bricks and anger, but with quiet dignity, and I saw Jamie watching you. He saw it too. We developed this unspoken pact, the two of us, to protect the sanctuary you had created. We'd exchange a quick glance after one of her jabs, a silent agreement to just get through it, to not let her chaos touch the peace we'd found.